time to get geeked up.
And you can kind of say that this one is a huge one, too, because it's kind of like, I don't want to say the return of Eddie Murphy, but it's definitely, I am going to say it, the return of Eddie Murphy. You know, he had a big year of hosting the Christmas special on SNL.
For sure.
And then coming out with, like, a movie, like an Eddie Murphy kind of back-to-basics movie. This is the first, I guess without giving away the guest of the IMDB breakdown, but this is the first R-rated movie Eddie Murphy has made in almost 20 years. The last R-rated movie he made was Life in 1999, if you can believe that.
Wow. Yeah, I would not have guessed that. I mean, you definitely know, you just get the sense from Eddie Murphy's recent career that he definitely flipped more into family-friendly stuff over the last, decade or so, you know? Mm-hmm. But I would not have guessed it's been all the way back to 99 since Life for an R-rated film.
For an R-rated, because even then, I think even after that, he was making the Nutty Professor movies, but those aren't rated R.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's doing the voice on Shrek.
Of course, he has had lots of franchise stuff, but even in general, he kind of has went away for the last 10 years because really he was extremely active for through the 2000s with the franchise stuff, and of course through the 90s. And Eddie Murphy's a very interesting character for me and Devin, as we always love to get into. We're kids from the 90s. And this is always like a big generation gap that seems to come up. But we grew up, even last week I think we were talking about it with Robin Williams, but we grew up in the world of post-Eddie Murphy famous. So for me and you, I'd say our Eddie Murphy go-to based on our lives would probably be Nutty Professor anyway. Then of course you get into the back catalog, but that was our first experience with Eddie Murphy, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can't argue that because it's not like I was really, as a kid, watching 48 Hours Coming to America until I was much older.
For sure. Or even the SNL stuff, like you mentioned. That's not our era of SNL, where I guess is really where it all started for Eddie Murphy. And I do have a Eddie Murphy, and I've actually got a little Eddie Murphy IMDB list, as I like to do here, as we like to do here on the show. So I've got kind of the highlight reel for his IMDb. But he really, I guess, was most known in a lot of ways for really saving SNL in the early 80s,
For sure. And that's one of the things, kind of like what you were saying, is it's before our time of, a lot of people, even the SNL that we've been watching.
Yeah, the class. Our SNL class is the Farley Sandler years, not the Murphy Piscopo years.
A couple of interesting things about Eddie Murphy on SNL, too, is Eddie Murphy on SNL, if I'm not mistaken, was during the time when Lorne Michaels wasn't doing the show. There was that brief time where he walked away. So Lorne Michaels doesn't really have an Eddie Murphy grab. Also, an interesting thing about Eddie Murphy being on Saturday Night Live is he's the only cast member that hosted the show, was the host while still in the cast.
Wow, that's a great trivia fact that I didn't know.
And apparently the whole cast fucking hated it.
Interesting. So they just he was, because I'm going to get into a little bit here, but he was throughout his couple years while on SNL, he was making some pretty big hit movies as well, which is kind of, they usually wait till after they leave the cast. But you know what? I never put it to two and two together. You make a great point there as well, that for such an infamous SNL cast member, none of his movies are at all associated with SNL productions, which even, Sandler, who, Lorne Michaels didn't necessarily produce those, Wayne's World style. He's still very much associated. Those are all SNL cast members in the movies and all that kind of stuff. Eddie Murphy's movies are, totally separate, but I guess just to case in point for what we're talking about. But he came on the scene as well in SNL, the big, world's most famous fun fact, but 19 years old when he emerged on SNL in 1980, all right? And let's just talk about this decade. I'm just going to run through you the domination of Eddie Murphy in the 80s. Legendary, SNL cast member as well. Then came on the scene, first movie, like Devin said, 48 Hours, all-time classic. Network, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop. All right, those are all while still in the SNL cast. All right, between 84, he's already made, been in the cast, already done 48 Hours, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop, then Beverly Hills Cop 2, Coming to America, Harlem Nights, and the 48 Hours sequel, another 48. All in the 80s, as well as, of course, Delirious and Raw, two of, like, the all-time most famous comedy albums.
For sure.
So, I mean, just right there, like, talk about dominating a decade. Just, like, epic SNL cast member, two classic comedy specials.
And like you said, even while still on SNL, all those movies, at least 3 of those movies he made while still on SNL, were huge hits. It wasn't like they were rinky-dinky. 48 Hours, Trading Places, and Beverly Hills Cop were all huge, huge hits.
Yeah, for sure. So that takes you through. So coming into the 90s, he's like all-time, he's an all-time, literally an all-time run in comedy anyway. Like, you can't have a better 10-year span. All right, then for the 90s, all right, we had Boomerang, Vampire in Brooklyn, of course, Nutty Professor, Metro, which I believe, is that with, who's that fucking New York, the ginger from New York? So he's talking about the Beastie Boys.
Rappaport?
Yeah, Rappaport, exactly. Is that with Metro? Is that Eddie Murphy and Rappaport? I believe I remember liking Metro in the late 90s.
I forgot about Metro, man. I forgot all about that movie.
I think, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure Rappaport's in that one. Then Dr. Dolittle by 98. Dr. Dolittle, so another kind of more family franchise, family friendly, what turned into a franchise. Holy Man, Life. Like Devin said, Bowfinger, which was a decent one, Nutty Professor 2, another hit. So, for the 90s, not bad. Not, nothing classic like the 80s, but a pretty respectable decade by most movie stars' careers.
Well, I would even say a big one you left out in the 90s just because kind of putting a nod to what his future holds, but in voice acting-wise, I mean, Mulan was a Disney movie that was huge that he did a voice in that movie.
Okay, great call.
Before he was even Donkey and Shrek in the 2000s, he was still already kind of doing voice work and getting that cartoon money as Mushu in the Mulan movie.
Okay, great call. And you can just see where the career is heading from, like, super, raw and delirious, super hardcore comedy albums, to the 90s starting to go more family friendly, Nutty Professor, Disney voiceovers, all that kind of stuff. So then leading into the 2000s, where he really kind of then takes over with all of the Shrek movies, the Dr. Dolittle 2, Pluto Nash is another one, Daddy Daycare, Norbit, another like family smash, even Dreamgirls, which was, a more Oscar bait for Eddie Murphy. He actually won the Golden Globes for Best Supporting Actor in that one, losing out to Alan Arkin in the Oscars on my research for Little Miss Sunshine. But so not exactly family, not exactly a kids movie there, but definitely much more mainstream, relatable role, big time role for Eddie Murphy.
Exactly. It's not that Eddie Murphy like comedy slaps that you would got to know from the 80s and 90s.
For sure. But still, extremely successful. I mean, we're talking right now, I've just ran through, and then, of course, we have Shreks 2 and 3 throughout, so you get to 2007, and all of a sudden, we've ran through, like, 30 years of, top-notch fame and relevancy for Eddie Murphy. And then that's pretty much kind of, though, where it taps out for me for Eddie Murphy, I'd say, is really the first since Dreamgirls is this movie. I guess he has, made a couple of movies over the last couple years, but really, compared to like 30 consecutive years of hard work, he's really taken the last decade, taken 10 years off, for so to speak, here.
For sure. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, again, like, this movie is kind of, everyone was saying, was like Eddie Murphy's big comeback, his SNL thing, Dolomite. I mean, and SNL was for Dolomite. But to see him on SNL, like, doing comedy again, is one of those big rumored things, too, and there's kind of hints around that Eddie Murphy's kind of said about, but will Eddie Murphy go back into comedy?
There's already, I guess, the rumors have been solved, as I'll get into now, but there's definitely Eddie Murphy's return to the scene, because as well in production right now, I'm not sure if, potentially delayed by the whole coronavirus situation, as of course, but scheduled for release within the next years as well are the big Coming to America sequel. All right, Coming to America, as well as a fourth installment and a reboot of the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. So probably two of Eddie Murphy's most famous roles, getting revised. So poised for a huge breakout. A comeback, I don't say breakout, but a huge comeback for Eddie Murphy, who, based upon Dolomite, still has a lot of great years left in the tank.
Ooh, baby, it's time to get geeked up.